talk was because I kept seeing all the time on Twitter and social media generally, people saying, if you can't code, you can't be an infosec. And it really, really, really annoyed me because I work with some very clever people who can't code at all. And I think it's putting people off coming into information security, but also I think as I went through creating the talk, it made me think about the other skills that maybe we don't talk about enough. We kind of focus on all of this technical stuff and pen testing and red teaming, and that's the only thing you can do. And you need far more than that. And even pen testers, I remember Andy Gill saying he's paid to write reports. The pen testing comes as an added extra. And so I thought that we would see where we could get to with a bit of a talk. So this is very quickly about me. 10 years in RAF Telecoms. You'll notice it was started in 1980 when I was 16. So I've been around a bit. I worked on my first computer in 1980. I've been doing it ever since, on and off. I've done a bunch of stuff, including working in schools. I've lectured in further education. I taught GMVQ IT and BTEC IT and various things like that. And I've worked for a number of different businesses, generally around IT infrastructure. And so 5, maybe 6 years ago, I moved from IT infrastructure to security. We set up a new security team at Grafton. We hadn't had one before. We'd had compliance team, for want of a better description. When WannaCry hit in 2018, I think the whole landscape changed, and people were far more interested in, well, why were we vulnerable to that? Why hadn't we taken the steps that we should have taken? And I think the whole, the way people looked at security changed. It was no longer about writing policies. It was actually taking action. And we set up a security team. I had built everything, and now they made me go and secure everything. I was asked to move over. I had an interest in it, to be fair. Don't hold it against me, but I went and did CEH. And it opened my eyes to, I wrote an article that said every IT manager should do a CEH. Because it opened my eyes to things that I didn't know. And I probably still stand by that. I haven't seen it for 5 years, so I don't know if it's changed. But I do think every IT manager should do a security qualification, because I'd been doing it for 40 years and I didn't know. There was so much that I didn't know. I mean, they do say you don't know what you don't know, and that was true. So anyway, that's a bit about me. I consider myself to be a technical person. You'll see on the next slide in a minute what my boss says about me. I still use all of the skills that we're about to talk about in my job every day. And so even if you are a pen tester, if you want to go to red teaming, if you want to go and do some of that very, very technical stuff, these skills are still very important. And I think often more important than some of the practical stuff. Everybody can learn the practical stuff. Some of this is much more difficult to learn. And you need to find people that have got these skills naturally, and then maybe train them to do the more technical things. So what do? As was said in the introduction, I'm an information security specialist. I am a generalist. I cover everything from one end to the other. I do security architecture right down to forensics and incident response. I'm not a specialist in any of it. Everything I do, I've got other people that I can call on to help. So I might do the initial incident response calls and decide that we need to call in Unit 42 or KPMG or whoever is the flavor of the month. I might be given something, a laptop or something to do a bit of forensics on, to say, did this person take data off this laptop and put it on a USB stick and things like that. It's not real forensics, it's not criminal forensics, but it's that kind of thing. But my boss introduced me the other day as the technical authority. I was for a long time, in my role as a security information infrastructure manager, I was referred to as the technical design authority for Grafton Group. And my boss now introduces me as the technical authority for Grafton Group. That's I'm not sure that other people agree, and I'm not so sure that I'd get away with claiming that if I was talking to other people within the business, but it's nice when he introduces me to vendors that way. So, as I said earlier, there's a lot of talk about the technical things, and everybody in cyber wants to be a pen tester. We recruited 2 people last year. We had 30. We had over 100 applications. We shortlisted that down to 10. Of those 10, 9 had master's degrees in cyber. And of those 9, 1 had an interest in something other than, I want to go and break into things. And of the 2 roles that we were doing, one was a kind of SOC analyst role, a very low-level tier 1 SOC analyst, and the other one was GRC. Neither of them were go and break into things. But that's all we seem to be hearing about. So there are technical and non-technical roles in security. You don't have to be a pen tester or a red teamer. They are all skilled roles. So even if you're working in GRC, there are skills in GRC that I don't have. There are skills people, do you all know what I mean by GRC, by the way? I'm using these acronyms. No? It's governance, risk, and compliance. So it's the bit that checks the stuff and makes sure it's done properly. So I tell them they've got to do. He's building a new computer system. He comes to me and says, Ian, this is our design. And I look over it and I say, yes, that's fine. You need to do this bit here, or you need to do that there, or you need to do that there. Make it secure by design. Go and build it. And when it's built, it's the GRC people that come back and do the checks to say, did you do what Ian had said? Did you do what these policies and standards say? And then beyond governance, risk, and compliance, there's probably others like audit teams. And you've got, in bigger places like ours, we've got an internal audit team. And then we also do external audits with larger companies like PwC, KPMG, and the likes of those. But despite there being technical and non-technical opportunities in infosec, this particular talk is not aimed at one side of that fence or the other. In my opinion, and this is my opinion, this is what I've found in the last 5 or 6 years, these skills are required in different parts of every bit. So whether you're working in GRC and you're writing policies and talking to people about governance and risk, or whether you are a pen tester writing reports and having to explain that to the customer, these skills will cross over in all fields. Now, this might seem a bit rude, and you're all being very attentive, so I thank you for that. But it's not aimed at you here. It's aimed at security people generally when they're on a call or in a room with people, because we're very, very bad at it. I'm incredibly bad at it. Part of that, I think, is that I've decided or come to the conclusion that I have some level of neurodivergency. I have something that stops me from getting past when somebody says something that's not right. If my boss makes a comment that is technically inaccurate, I find it really, really, really difficult to let it go. I'm getting better at it, but I still find it really, really, really difficult. I often keep myself on mute and scream at him when he can't hear me, and then I feel a bit better. But it's something we don't do very, very well, and I think it's even harder now. We're doing it all on Teams and Zoom and Google Meet. We're not in a room. When you're in a room like this, it's much harder to look at your laptop or read a book or get on with all those other tasks that you need to get on with because you've got deadlines. It's much, much, much harder now to do these things. And listening is actually really, it's more difficult than most people think it is. So there are 3 types of listening. Attentive listening is pretty much what you're doing now. You are sat there, most of you, sat there listening, not doing anything else, not looking at anything else, not paying attention to anything else. You are, working hard to eliminate other distractions. Responsive listening is what, I'm sorry to pick on you, lady in the beige coat, but she's nodding as I talk. So clearly she's responding to what I'm saying. She's, I understand that that person is attentive and responsive. And that is what this next piece is. This is active listening. It is where you are listening and doing nothing else. You are making sure that the speaker or the person that is giving their view is being listened to. So you're being responsive, but you're also taking some other steps to make sure you don't interrupt them. Avoid invalidating the speaker's comments. This is something that's really, again, it goes back to the "I'm sorry, John, you're wrong" kind of thing. If somebody says something, it might not be 100% correct, but if you invalidate what they say, they're just going to shut up and not take part anymore, and then you're going to miss something that's really, really, really important. Don't give. An active listener won't give personal opinions because they will have listened to what's been said. They will have consumed what's been said, and if they haven't got anything to give to the conversation that is valid, they'll not do it. Giving personal opinions generally isn't a valid way of passing on information. Especially in security, when we're talking about security architecture, when we're talking about what's going to happen in policy, when we're talking about building a new app and what security features need to be around it, there might be a place where you say, well, I've had this experience before. That is maybe some advice, but there's a time and place for doing that. It's not interrupting the person that's speaking to do it. The other thing that I see a lot, and I'm not going to name names because I do like my job, but I see it a lot on calls that I'm on, and that's when there are very senior people on the calls. They frequently draw the conversation to them. They don't let me finish. They don't let my boss finish. They frequently draw the conversation to them and what's important to them. And that really does then close the conversation down, because if you've got a senior director saying, I want to do it this way, everybody else just shuts up. So you might not be the senior director, but you might be the senior security person in that meeting. And if you're talking to a bunch of marketing people who want to build a new website, they want to do a Tesco club card for their business. They want to do a reward scheme for their business, and they're going to build this reward scheme. They're going to issue cards to people. They're going to gather names and addresses. They're going to have a website so they can look up to see how many points they've got. And this is a fantastic idea. They've been planning it for weeks and weeks. Never thought about any of the security issues with it. But if you shut them down, as soon as they say, I want to do this, and you say, well, no, you can't do that. Let's talk about security, and these are the reasons why, and you bring the conversation to you, then they're going to go ahead without you, or they're just not going to talk anymore and engage in the conversation. So try to listen, try to be attentive. I find it really difficult on Teams to be attentive because I've got 56 things that need to get on with. I've got reports that need to be out by the end of the day. I've got other calls in my queue that need me to actually physically do something and fix something that's broken. And sitting on a call for an hour listening to somebody, I find it really difficult to sit there and do nothing else. I'm not saying any of this is easy, but it is something that we need to practice better, I think. On all of the slides, I'm happy for you to have the slides as well. If you want them, I'll make them available through the organisers. And I've put all of the sources where I can. I've put the sources on the slides. This, for me, is the really, really big one. To be fair, you could say that about any of them, I think. But for me, this is the really, really big one. And I've got an example, or a couple of examples in here. So critical thinking for me is the assimilation, the quick assimilation and decision making. You've got to take in a load of information in a very short period of time and say yes or no, or maybe. You're going to be on a call for an hour, maybe not even that long, with somebody who wants to do something, and you've got to make a decision. So I'm talking about my job, I'm talking about security architecture. Somebody will come and say, we are going to do this in Azure. We are going to do this with Active Directory. We are going to do this with this piece of technology. I'm going to bring my 12-year-old MacBook to a cybersecurity conference and hope nobody hacks me. You've got to take in a whole load of information very quickly, consider all of that on the fly while they're talking. So a minute ago I told you to listen attentively. Now I'm telling you that you've got to be able to take all of that in and make decisions in a relatively short period of time. That's critical thinking. That is being able to conceptualize what's going on, bring in all of the information, analyze it, and give a response. Doesn't mean the response has to be 100%. You can say something like, given the information that's been discussed here today, I don't see that there'd be too many problems. We obviously need to go into more detail. I would like to understand more about A, B, C, X, Y, Z, and then arrange to gather that information from the audience. But you've got to be able to decide what A, B, C, and X, Y, Z is, and what time frame you need it in, and all of that kind of thing. So I think critical thinking is something that we miss generally across large swathes of people that I meet. I'm sorry if I sound like a really grumpy old man, and I am a really grumpy old man, but the young people that I employ or have employed in recent years really struggle with the concept of critical thinking. I see it, I frequently get people who come to me and say, Ian, can I do this? It's like, well, what do you think? Well, I don't know, that's why I'm asking you. Well, have you even thought about it? Have you considered it? Do you think you should be able to do it? Well, I don't know, that's why I'm coming to you. So, and I don't have the most patient attitude to people who can't think for themselves, but I do have to be polite. I support 14 different brands in a group across Europe, but it is something, it's a skill that we really, really, really miss. And if you can do this, if you can sit and demonstrate this in an interview, for me, you're worth your weight in gold, and I'll teach you the skills. They used to say, employ for attitude, train for skill. And if you can come in and you've got this is one skill that you could come in with and demonstrate and show, then I would be really happy and really impressed. But once you've made those decisions, once you've taken in all that information, you've listened, you've taken in all that information, you've used your critical thinking skills, you've come to a decision, you are dealing with non-IT people a lot of the time, or you're dealing with IT people who aren't technical. I deal with a number of directors. None of those directors, they're all directors of IT, they're heads of IT, directors of IT. The group information side, the group director of information security and data protection, sorry, he's new, and I still can't say his title properly. They are not technical people. They are people who are good at management, but they're not necessarily technical people. I've got one director who's incredibly technical, who used to work for Raycal as a technical architect. He's incredibly technical, and I really enjoy working with him. I don't have to explain anything to him. He's great. I hope he doesn't see the recording of this. But I work with other people who are good at their job, but their job they don't need the technical stuff. So I've forgot a timer, so could you just keep an eye on time for me. Sorry. They won't understand a lot of the language that we do. I mean, we get pen test reports, and we get an executive summary, and we get a detailed technical report. I always say that we write pen test reports in the pen test language. It's like a third language. It's like it's something you have to go and learn yourself. It's like learning French or German or Spanish. Honestly, it's not English in the way that we think of English. It really isn't. What we have to do is we have to take pen test language and we have to turn it into something they understand. And you will have to do that. At times, you will have to do that for, even for IT people, because there will be IT people who've built these systems, who are operating these systems, who don't know what a remote code execution vulnerability is. I know that might sound daft, might sound unbelievable. They just won't know. They won't even have the concept of how can you run code on my machines remotely. You've got to get to my machines and you've got to log in and you've got to have access to them. Right? It comes back to what I said earlier about most IT professionals don't understand security. I say most, that's probably stretching the point, but there are a lot. And you're going to have to do this in both written and verbal form. So you're going to have to talk to people. You're going to have to be in meetings, whether they are in person or whether they're on Teams or Zoom or Google Meet. But you're going to have to do it. So sometimes you'll have to write papers that explain what you need from them. You might have to write a report about something that you found. If you're in governance and risk, you're going to have to write policies and standards and processes and procedures. So these things all need to be done in a format that people can read and understand. Here is an example. So is anybody here want to be anybody here doing cyber where pen testing is a particular focus? I'm guessing that you probably already know the answer to this, but how would you explain cross-site scripting to a non-IT person? You don't have to answer. I put you on the spot. You don't have to answer. It's actually really, I mean, the answer that we've got in here, a user can be tricked into running malicious code, is about as simple as you could get. But actually explaining to somebody what cross-site scripting is and the fact that actually it could be reflective cross-site scripting or still cross-site scripting, if you start going down there, they're gone. You've lost them. If you say, well, it just means that somebody could be tricked into running code they shouldn't run. You don't need to worry about how. The way we get around that is that when people type things into our website, we have to check the input. We have to make sure that that input doesn't contain something that might be used maliciously, and we do that by carrying out X, Y, and Z. Excuse me. Now, we talked about critical thinking earlier, so I don't know whether this will be something that we can do here or not, but there are 3 things on that report. This is a real live report, by the way. This is a report on the website in one of our businesses. I hasten to add, they've all been fixed. So even if you go and check all 14, there's 250 websites across 14 businesses, so keep you busy for a while trying to find them. But there are 3 things on there that aren't marked as high, but could lead to a serious breach if you link them together. And that's where the critical thinking comes in, because you've got to assimilate all of that information. You've got to make decisions about that information in a relatively small time frame. I got this from our internal audit team. The business involved said, well, we're not dealing with this and this and this because these are lows and mediums. We're just dealing with the highs and criticals. And he said, Ian, what do you think? And I said, well, look, at the bottom there, it says there's missing anti-scripting controls, which means that an attacker can exploit the lack of those to use custom scripts to just kind of send unlimited requests. In the middle one, in the yellow bits, there's one that says username enumeration. So you can identify the email address of registered users via the registration page. So if I can script that, if I can write some code that says try all of these names against something that has got no controls on how many times it can do it, and tells me whether that is valid or not, I'll find out whether I've got a valid user. And then, additionally, there's a thing about weak passwords. And if any of you know anything about human behavior, you'll know that humans are very, very bad at passwords. And so, if you combine a list of email addresses, a list of passwords, and some scripting, for me, whilst they are on here, lows and mediums, it actually gives you a really straightforward route to breach. And it happened. And I had to promise them that it wasn't me, because they gave me this report on the Tuesday, and the breach happened Tuesday night. And honestly, I actually asked somebody to check my laptop to make sure that it hadn't been seen, or I hadn't done something silly, or because it was so coincidental. But exactly what I reported back to audit has been what I considered to be, this is quite serious, really. You haven't got any of these controls in place. This is really quite serious. That night, somebody broke into the website using exactly those techniques. Could have been a pen tester, I suppose. I don't know. Fortunately, they couldn't do anything. There's nothing they could do. I mean, they can order some bricks and sand, have it sent somewhere, but they've still got to pay for it. So there's no accounts, there's no payment, you can order the bricks and sand and have it sent to your house, but you still got to use a credit card to buy it with. I suppose you could use a stolen credit card, but problem solving and critical thinking probably go together, I would think. We do face challenges in our business, whether you're looking at risk and saying, look, there's a really, really big risk here. There isn't really any in here to demonstrate, but look, there's a cable running across there. That's really a bit of a risk. It's running to that socket on the wall. Can you not relocate that? Is there not some other way that you can route that cable around? Well, look, there's some steps there, but there's no handrails up the side of them. Can we not fit some handrails? It doesn't matter what the risk is, there will always be a reason why you can't do it. I'm sorry, we can't run this cable any other way because it's got to come across to the front desk, and there's no other sockets behind here to run it to. So it's got to run across the floor for this conference. It's an imaginary cable. You have to believe it's there. You will face problems. You will need to think about them. You will need to consider how you're going to overcome them. And one of the ways to do that is to change your view. So don't think about it from a security perspective. Think about it from their perspective. Think about it from the person who's running a conference. What's their perspective? Think about it from the perspective of the customer who's going to be sitting in those seats and walking over the cable. What's the likelihood of them doing it, and how could you make it better for them? Well, one of the things you could do, rather than not having it plugged in, is that you could unplug it as people are coming in and plug it in once they're all sat down. You might have one or two people walking over it, but as they leave, because my talk's boring, and they're fed up and they would rather go and sit out there and have a cup of coffee, but that's going to be one or two rather than 10, 20 or 30. And so the risk is reduced. The problem might not be solved in its literal form, but the risk is reduced. The problem is therefore reduced. And you've done that by thinking about it in a slightly different way. And that's what you will have to do throughout any career in security. I use a very simple one, but there will always be these challenges where somebody will say, we can't do that because, We can't do that because, and at that point you've got to say, well, what can we do? How can we approach it? How can we overcome it? This thing needs to go live. The go live date is tomorrow. We promised everybody we're going live tomorrow. But your pen test report says you've got this massive hole. What can we do? How can we fulfill your go live date and reduce the risk on this thing? I would hope you'd reviewed it before the day before it went live, but you will come across these kind of things. So here's another example. Here's another question for you. If you want to look up at the screen, there are 3 things that came out of a pen test. This is another website pen test. When I use the example of the go live, it wasn't going live the next day, but it was going live in a couple of weeks' time. And we got this pen test and we saw some things that we weren't particularly happy about. So what's the common denominator? How are we going to fix the things now so that we can get the site live on the day it's supposed to go live, and what we're going to do more long term? Go on. Yeah.
Admin has too much privileges.
Yeah. Well, the administrator does have a lot of privileges, but he's the administrator. And actually, she was the administrator in this particular instance. But everything tied back to that administrator account or those administrator accounts. So what can we do to fix the things now? The first thing we did was that we reduced the number of administrators. So now we had 1. You can be the administrator. Everything comes through you. You don't create any more. And you go and change the password policy immediately so that it has to be strong. You have to have longer is better than shorter and complex. That's going to be controversial, isn't it, when somebody watches the video? A longer password with less complexity is better than a shorter password with lots of complexity. I said it out loud. If we reduce it, we reduce the risk of somebody adding malicious code to the website, and if they do, we know who did it. If we find unsafe or malicious files being uploaded to the website, we have reduced that risk because we've reduced it to 1 person, and we know who that 1 person is. And by changing the password policy, we strengthened that, so the chance of somebody actually guessing her password or brute forcing that password from the website is much reduced. It might not be completely 0, but it's much reduced. So that's what we did. We found the common denominator. We found the things that we needed to do now. And then how did we go about fixing it more long term? We actually sent the code back to the developers and said, really, mate, come on, do some checks. Check your files before you upload. Restrict what files they can upload. And do some input validation. But these are the things that you will come across. You don't need to be technical to look at this, really. I don't think you do. I mean, it's obvious that administrator is the word that's in all 3 things. And so that's where it comes to. And that's, again, coming back to critical thinking. You've got to assimilate this information. You've got to read it, think about it, understand it, and come up with an answer fairly quickly. We had to do it on a call. Literally, we had the developers, the business who were building the site, and the pen test company on a call, going through it. And I said, look at this. You can't go live with this in this state. And that caused chaos. I do like throwing hand grenades in like that. But, and you're going to have to negotiate. We had to negotiate with that previous example. We had to negotiate what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. We had to negotiate with the business that they could now only have 1 administrator until these problems were sorted out.